There's perhaps a general lack of correct procedures if people want to renovate and or extend or add things on like carports or pergolas. I think people need to understand that if you have a new house built, if you're going to have, for example, a solar hot water system put on to a roof, then that is actually taken into account when the roof is designed. So it's designed to accommodate that extra weight. And often what happens these days with existing houses is that people want solar hot water, so they go ahead and they call a company in, they plonk the solar hot water on a roof, which technically wasn't designed to carry that sort of weight. So far there's not potentially too many problems, but I guess it boils down to whether that roof was actually structurally sound to start with. So for example, say a tradie had come along and needed to put an air conditioning duct in, so they cut one member of a truss out even though they're not supposed to. When you then apply more weight onto a roof which is already substandard and not actually structurally sound any longer, that's when ultimately you can get serious structural problems and possible serious repercussions with your roof. I always believe that if you own a house, you need to know a little bit about that house, and certainly I think it's a good idea that you are familiar with how your roof is constructed, what type of roof it is. If it is a truss roof, then your average builder could certainly identify that for you. And of course, if it is a truss roof, in theory that makes it a lot more simple to renovate, move internal walls around, that sort of thing, rather than a conventionally framed roof, which of course has weight bearing on internal walls often. But the thing that often sometimes gets forgotten with the structural aspects of the truss roof is that it's not just the roof that we're talking about, it's actually the walls as well. So it's not like the roof is isolated. It all has to be taken in consideration with the structural integrity of a house. So what that means is that some of those internal walls will be bracing walls. Now, what type of bracing wall you wouldn't find out until you actually remove the interior linings. So, for example, it might be braced with plywood, it might be cross-braced with metal bracing. Now, if you're going to remove that wall, what you've done is you've removed a bracing panel, which is part of the structural integrity of that house. And obviously to do that without getting the proper advice and making sure that it's obviously a safe thing to do, again, you do leave yourself open to possible problems with the structure of your house. I think very much in the industry over the years, the onus is often on getting a job done as quickly as possible. And if you encounter a problem, say for example you had a job to do and you saw that a truss had been damaged, you may know what the right thing to do is. The right thing to do is to actually refer it on to someone, to get it checked, to get it replaced or repaired, whatever needs to happen. But often in the industry, everything's done to a price, so it's, get in there, do it quickly, and often things that should be done don't get done. And I think that's where quality and standards can be compromised to a degree that can be quite detrimental in the long run to the owner of the house. I believe there's plenty of information out there. Whether or not people take the time to update themselves, to keep themselves informed with the changes, because requirements, in 1995 a piece of timber would span this far, and then in 2001 it won't, simply because they've changed the span tables. So things are always changing, and I think it's just really important that people keep up to speed in the industry and make sure that they update their knowledge. And that obviously if you are doing a specific job that requires specific knowledge, as in erecting trusses, and even just knowing about how to manage them prior to being erected, there's a whole realm of information out there that people can certainly access, and gives them everything that they need to do. They just need to access it and read it. Well, I always like to check the general structure of the roof to make sure that there's no obvious problems. And that would even go to the extent of, for example, pinpointing any possible electrical problems. If you're working in a roof space, often there's wiring that might not have been done correctly. There's issues around possible termites could have affected roof structures. It may not be safe. So a general sort of assessment of how safe the actual work area is, and then to make sure that whatever has to happen within that space, that you always remember that each truss, you know, it's like your hand. You know, you take one finger off of your hand still works, which is the same thing if you cut, you know, a section out of a truss. It still works to a point, but if you have to carry something that's really heavy and you're missing a finger, then you're going to find that ultimately it's not going to do the job. It's not going to carry the weight once you put it under load. It can cope, you know, for a while, but put load on it and it's going to collapse. So it's the same sort of thing, respecting, I guess, the integrity of each individual truss has to remain an individual truss, because otherwise it doesn't work in its skeleton system within the roof space. It's a similar sort of thing. Again, that truss roof would have been designed to do specifically the job it was doing, which is confined within those walls and that roof space. So once you add on extra things to it, you're then applying an extra load. You could also be applying other forces, whether it be wind forces, twisting, that kind of thing. So certainly you just can't add stuff on and assume that it's going to be okay. So you always need to make sure that you get the correct advice. And if you're having a job done by a tradesperson, then you need to make sure that they're actually going to follow the correct procedures. And often you can get good advice from council in regard to what's required to make that process happen smoothly. Absolutely. I mean, I always say to people, look, if you're not sure, and this could be about any DIY addition or any project you want to undertake, if you're not sure, go speak to council, because they'll tell you, quick smart, whether it needs approval, you know, building approval, planning approval. They'll happily take your money and make sure that it, you know, it's safe and it's been done properly. There's also sort of repercussions if you sell the house later on. I've sort of checked out a number of houses for people, and they've been buying a house which has actually had substandard building work done on it, which hasn't had council approval. Stuff like filling in verandas is a classic one. Filling in garages, you know, roller door type garages, people make that into another room. You can't legally do that, and yet people often do because they don't check with council first and they don't know, so they go ahead and do it. I like to keep things simple. I think that, you know, if you're working in the industry, unless you're doing something which is specifically rated, if specifically regarding truss installation, you don't need to know everything that's in the Australian standards that relates to the installation of trusses. You just have to remember that it's an integral unit. It has to just stay as it is, one piece. You can't cut into it, you can't chop into it. It's just one of those things that has to stay as it came from the factory. It sits in the roof and it sits there forever. And then there's, in theory, no problems.